All the black there.
Oh,
Got a gravel front.
yeah.
So I can go and just pull them up to the roots.
Oh, the way to do it.
Yeah, because there's a few areas where it's like the old cow barn that's been sitting dormant for like 10 years. So it's completely taking it over. It's going ripping. Like they're not going in there with clippers, getting all cut up anymore.
Oh, that's what we did often. Yeah, I know. They're all over there too.
All right, folks, we're just ticking over to 1 o'clock here. So I'd like to welcome you to the March 22nd Regional Board meeting for the Catholic Regional District. And I want to recognize that we're holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Plahaman region. We have an agenda in front of us. I don't know of any changes to the agenda, so do we have somebody who would like to move adoption of it? Director McCormick, seconded by Director Gisborne. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Adoption of the minutes of the regular board meeting February 22nd, 2023. Are there any errors or omissions? None. Anybody want to move adoption of the minutes? Director McCormick, seconded Director Gisborne. Thanks very much. Any discussion? None. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. We're at delegations and inquiries. I understand we have an unregistered delegation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
If there's no opposition by the members of the board, Director Doubt.
Who is the unregistered delegate?
That's a good point. Do you want to announce yourself?
God, we could be anyone.
What are we going to talk about?
You're here. Sorry, state your names, please.
We're from the Lund Society.
Okay.
And we've come to talk about the issue with our loan and the failed thing that has just happened and our desire to go to referendum.
Okay, so now we know who it is, Director Dow.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. You know, other people are watching, and it's good to know just exactly why you're here and what you're planning to talk about.
Thank you. And I think I did register. I called and asked permission to come and speak. I figured that meant we were registered.
Well, there's a certain timeline that we have to adhere to when they get the agendas out. So if it doesn't come in time, then it's registered. But if everybody on the board is happy with it, I say we'll give them 10 minutes. So the reason why I understand you're all together as one delegation. Yes. Okay, perfect. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'll just start. Mine is brief. I want to first of all acknowledge all the work that Patrick Devereaux has done for our society. He's been amazing, and we've been trying to get this edition for years, and Patrick is the one who stepped up and wrote the grant for us and is always available. So thanks to him, our past director, our new director, and for you, the board, for your support in letting that go ahead, and for what you've just done, sending out information to the whole community. It's very appreciated. There's just one little tick about that information that came out, and it makes me wonder about the accuracy of the no count. A lot of people spoke to me about not really being clear what they were supposed to do with it. Some people thought they could check it and it meant a yes. So anyway, we won't be doing that again, but just in the future, it has to be very clear at the top. If you check, it's no. And that's it for me. Thank you.
My name's Ed Levy. When the original notice came out, it was said that the loan that was being asked to be approved was for 1.1 million. And after that, there have been some donations from the community, $115,000 so far, which means that the amount that needs to be borrowed is therefore reduced. And Michelle very clearly explains that now on the website so that the amount is lower, and that therefore makes it more palatable. And it also shows that the number of people in the community who support it and are willing to put up, well, so far $115,000. We hope that continues, and we'd ask that when the next notice goes out, that it's explained the degree to which the pledges so far reduces what each member of the community would have to pay. And also, right before the meeting, I've just received a note from several people saying that there's a groundswell of people who want to donate already, and they'd like to know a clear way how to donate, maybe something on the website that would say how they could donate to the project. And maybe just make it clear that they could donate, and that lowers the amount that they and their colleagues will have to pay. One other point is that one of the sources of opposition is the water system in Lund. People are looking at the prospect that there's going to be a project that's going to cost $15 to $29 million. That it makes it really hard to say, let's come and approve a project to raise the taxes anymore. I know this is not it's not up to you, but anything you can do to make it clear that, as I understand it, there are alternatives to that $15 to $29 million project. There has to be a project, I understand that, but I believe that there's discussion going on that are looking at alternatives seriously, and anything you can do to make that clear to the folks in Area A would help with understanding and being the acceptance of the community center, which most of us think is really essential for the community. Thank you.
Yeah, because that's come up at meetings. People don't understand that we can't transfer the $4 million to the water project. They are not quite comprehending that if we don't use it for what it's supposed to be used for, it's gone. So we do need to, and I think a lot of the opposition has been from the folks that already are fearful about taxes. So we'd like to ask you to do the referendum, please. We just had a new member come to the board meeting last night, and he remembers as a kid the old Lund Hall and what community was like in Lund. And now we've had all these new families come in, 6 babies just born, like, and, yeah, and 5 more coming. We have total inability to house the population and pull our community together. So those of us who've lived there forever know what it was like. And yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other comments to be made today, or?
We just had one little comment. My name is Christine McRae. So yes, we would like this referendum to go ahead, and I'm curious as to what part the regional district would play, because obviously if we have a yes campaign that we have to organize here coming, just what role the regional district would play in that, and or is that our responsibility as a community society to rally the yes vote, or what that needs to look like?
Well, the opportunity for a delegation to come in is not really a back and forth question and answer period. So
we can think about that.
It is an opportunity for directors to ask questions of the delegation. So I'm going to open that up right now. If anybody has any questions, Director McCormick.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for your presentation. I can hear how passionate you are. My question is, because the alternative referendum process that we just went through didn't pass, and you say some of that might be to do with misunderstanding, do you feel optimistic that a full-scale referendum will be approved by the people of Lund? Okay.
I do, and we will be putting out more flyers again, letting people know, and we'll put out a huge effort to make sure people get to vote. So, but I do feel positive about it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Director Lennox, Director Fall, I wasn't sure if I saw your hand up or not. Oh, can't hear you.
No, my hand's not up.
Okay, Lennox.
Come on, Jason.
Yeah, hi everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. My connection's not super good.
We can.
So far, so good. You know, really, I don't have very many questions. I understand the issue fairly well now, and a lot of that is through the Lund Community Society. I just want to appreciate the hard work from this group, taking the effort to make presentation to really define some of the issues that have sort of evolved over time. I agree that there was confusion. People contacted me about this recent process, and you've eloquently identified most of the issues that are coming out of it and in the future. So I had some questions, but you've answered most of them, and we look forward to what's on the agenda coming up in this regard. Thank you.
Great. If you don't have any other comments, I know that staff has been taking some notes based on what you said about the donation button and the clarity around the water system and other issues. So, oh, sorry, Director.
Thank you so much for coming in. Hearing the comments about the obstacles to getting to the yes is helpful for us for the decision making. And yes, we don't do the water system. That's the improvement district. This is an item coming up later on our agenda. And my question is, are there any other obstacles, you know, for the people that are saying no? Like, is it mainly the water system, or are there other challenges? Because it's kind of like when I hear a no, I'm always hearing, well, convince me to say yes. And I'm just wondering, what, like, are there any other hurdles that you've heard? Because, well, I'm not from London.
Parking is a big problem, but parking is a problem for us all summer long. And so it's not our problem, but it is a huge problem. But we think we have a potential really excellent site right next to us that is just empty that will be available for parking. So we know it's an issue and we will address it. And I think that will work out. But the highway, I don't know what can be done about that.
Yeah, I've driven up there a few times in my life.
It's crazy.
You know, you've experienced it more than I have, but it's, yeah, everyone sees what they go there.
I mean, it's not safe to walk, bike ride. It's just.
Yeah. Right. That's
really parking and the taxes, particularly the taxes that might come from the water are the main. Right.
Yeah.
That we have to overcome.
Director Elliott.
Thank you. Karen.
You know about the highway.
I do. So thank you for being here. My question is, do you think that the people worried about the water knew there was a difference between this question that was done and the water one, or do you think they thought it was linked?
I don't know.
I think there were two issues. One is the overlap. The hope that you could use the 4.1 million for the water. The other is simply the amount of taxation that would be involved, or the amount of the cost for those who are on. There are only 125 people hooked up to the water system at the moment. And so the idea that you're going to have to, you know, grants will cover a lot of it, but there will also be a lot that would have to be covered by the community. That prospect is enough to scare people and say, you know, we don't want both of these tax things to hit us at the same time. That's why I hope that anything you can do to clarify and push forward the alternatives would be helpful.
They're really just a small portion of Area A, but.
And there was, in your opinion, very little understanding of the use it or lose it and you can't reallocate it idea of around the grant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. There's one at the back.
I'm going to speak a little bit more to that, if that's okay. I think it's partially the practical thing of that they don't want the tax increase, but I think that they're, like, when we had those meetings, what was evidence is there is just a real strong general frustration amongst the residents of Lund proper, which is very understandable, that's like clouding their ability to support this because they're using it as this kind of a scapegoat for their upset and anger because they feel neglected by the regional district. They feel neglected by the federal government and by the provincial government in regards to the water system. And it's not a rational thing. It's partially rational that it's about the money, but it's more about like they're ignoring us. They're not spending the money where they should. And then they say yes to this thing, which seems kind of superficial, which is why really it's like, how do we sell this and make people understand that this is something that actually increases the vitality of our community, which might actually increase the likelihood of more government investment in our community. Yeah, but it's a kind of more of a frustration, and you can see it in the people. And so it's really how do we change their minds? How do we change their perspective?
Great, thanks very much. Corporate Officer, you had a comment, Brenda? Is that right?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there's just a comment there about promotion if this board chooses to go to an assent vote referendum. And I would just encourage any groups out there who would like to advertise to promote yes or no to do so in conjunction with Elections BC, following those rules. It is subject to the local election campaign financing act. So just to make sure that that's the organization that oversees that process.
Thanks very much.
And can I ask, what if you approve a referendum, when would that be? What's our time frame?
We have the issue on the agenda today.
Okay. And
So, happening later on.
okay.
Thanks very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Moving on, no unfinished business, and we have correspondence, but it's all been moved to business arising from correspondence. There are recommendations to go along with the two items. So 7.1, correspondence dated February 24th, 2023 from Jake Martins, Comex Valley Regional District General Manager of Corporate Services, RE the North Island 911 Annual Shareholders and Directors Resolutions.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Director Gisborne. Any discussion? Director Doubt.
Yeah, these are straightforward adjustments that are explained in the package. They're resolutions that the 911 board wants to make, and we're looking for authorization from the regional district to make those slight changes, mostly reflecting the fact that there are some new members on the board since last year, and the slight way financial statements are published, which is online, which is more than what's required in the acts.
Thanks very much. I apologize. I should have gone to the mover first. If you had any comments on it, or no? Okay. Any other comments, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Moving to 7.2. Correspondence dated March 6, 2023 from Sheila Leachman, Pine Tree Improvement District Secretary, RE, request for letter of support.
I'll move the recommendation, but I also saw Jason Lennox had his hand up. So.
Well, Director Gisborne can move it and Director Lennox can second it. So any discussion, Director Gisborne, going to you first.
Yeah, it's an improvement district, and we all are very much aware of the challenges that improvement districts have when trying to access grant funding, you know, from the provincial government, federal government. And if they're going to be pursuing the community forest grant, you know, maybe that's an avenue that they can get. By the looks of their submission, they're really doing their due diligence to try and, you know, make it work with what they got. And I'm happy to support an improvement district because, well, we're seeing what's happening in London. The alternative is undesirable.
Sure. Thanks very much. Director Lennox.
Sorry, just have to get off mute there. I echo Director Gisborne's comments, and obviously improvement districts have limited tools for improvements to their improvement district. And it looks like there's a lot of history here in that area. They've identified what their must-haves and then like the haves are. And I think that I'd like to support this wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments? Director Doubt, followed by Director Adams.
Yeah. Does staff know, or can they share whether Pine Tree Improvement District has applied for regional district grants in aid of any kind?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Pine Tree Improvement District has in the past had infrastructure planning grants through the regional district, but they haven't officially applied for any community works funds or tried to apply for grants that have come out for infrastructure, although there has been discussion about it.
Thanks very much. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair.
So my concern is the eligibility of the project for community forest funds, and the community forest putting emphasis on projects that have partner funding, so that they're not the only source, and they tend to do things that are in addition to government responsibility, like infrastructure. Like they won't pave roads, they wouldn't do water systems in the city for sure. So I'm concerned that it doesn't meet eligibility criteria for that fund. So I would ask staff to check on that before we as a board would make any recommendation whatsoever.
I mean, it's my inclination to support the letter, because then we can leave it up to the community forest to decide whether it's eligible or not, instead of spending our staff time on doing the research. Like writing the letter is not a whole lot of time, I imagine, to do so, but I can understand where you're coming from. I mean, I question eligibility as well, but I guess it all depends on community forest, what they're feeling that day. Dr. Dowd.
I've spent time since I first read this agenda thinking about it, and I'm not going to be voting on it. And I will be. I'm not excluding myself because I don't think I'm in a conflict of interest. But City Council does have a vote in approving community forest grants, and I'm not going to vote on this because I want to wait until all the information from the community forest is available to council members before they vote on it. So I want to explain what I'm doing there. And, you know, as far as whether they qualify for a community forest grant, that's totally within the discretion of the community forest board to determine who does and who doesn't qualify. But I just wanted to clarify that. And I won't be voting, but the board has a choice to either approve this grant or do something else.
Okay, thanks very much. From what I understand, though, not voting is actually a vote in favor. You can't abstain from a vote. So if you don't raise your hand, you're still voting in favor of it. Director McCormick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to echo what you've said, it's not our position to say whether they're eligible or not, but I think wherever we can support improvement districts, we need to do so. They need all the help they can get. And so, yeah, I very much support sending the letter.
Okay. Any other comments on it, Director Gisborne?
Okay, yeah, I made comments already. My follow-up is, I don't know the community works funds, sorry. My head's, I have too much coffee. I don't know the community forest eligibility requirements. I don't think we need to burden our staff with finding that out. I think that's up for the community forest and city council to determine whether it's eligible or not. One of the things that has been coming up around this table is our community works funds. And in the past, we've put a lot of money for community works into Area B and some on Textile and some north of town. And Pine Tree is down in Area C. And I don't know if we've necessarily put a lot of community works funds down there. And I'm wondering if in the future, or maybe it might help their grant application, if we were able to also show that, we could be supportive with community works funds. But that's not a discussion really for today. It's more of just something to potentially consider, and maybe that might be something that helps their application in the future for community forest. So I'm getting them all mixed up. So that's just something I wanted to.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other comments to be made? And Director Fall.
Just briefly, thank you, Chair. Just to say the question for us is a request for a letter of support, and I fully support that. The funding agency, the community forest, that's up to them whether the application is good or bad. And if they come to us with other applications in the future, then we'll deal with those then. Right now, for the letter, I think we should help them. They're applying. That's what they're asking for us, and I'm happy to support them. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Don't see any other hands up, so we'll take a vote on the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? One opposed. Okay, moving on to Chair's report. March 3rd. There was a meeting of the ICT, the Island Coastal Economic Trust. I was unfortunately unable to attend due to a previously scheduled trip, but I went through the minutes and they doled out some money to various good causes, which was awesome to see. But the big issue that was discussed was the unfortunate decision by the provincial government to not invest in iced tea as part of the 2023 budget. And the unfortunate part about that, if it's not reversed, this will result in the dissolution and closure of the Island and Coasts Only Trust. So iced tea has the backing of UBCM, and 42 letters of support were sent to the previous minister calling for a one-time investment of $150 million by the government, which would, based on the trust's track record, turn into about $1 billion in total investment in communities every 20 years. So it's unfortunate that they didn't include that in the budget. It is still possible that they could change their minds and include it with some leftover funding. Let's hope they go ahead and do that, because I think it's very valuable for a lot of the communities in our area. March 17th, I participated in a joint meeting of the QRD, the Islands Trust, and the Skeety Island Local Trust Committee. We discussed a number of issues, including the barge ramp, internet access, and First Nations relations. But Director Fall was also in attendance, and I imagine he has a much more detailed report as far as part of his director's report. So I'll let him catch you all up on that. On March 27th to the 30th, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, that's next week, but I will be attending the Regional District Chair and CAO Forum in Victoria, followed by the Municipal Finance Authority's AGM. So I will report back on those meetings next month. For Director's Report, March 8th, I met with Stillwater Community Advisory Group. And as we do every year, a lot of this meeting was spent on assessing Western Forest Products' success or failure at attaining their marks to qualify for recognized certification. I am happy to report that they met the requirements within the allowable variances in all the indicators that we reviewed. I thought it was also interesting to learn that in 2022, there was $35.3 million paid to local contractors. So forestry is still a very significant part of our economy. The Stillwater CAG is actually looking for members. Specifically, we are looking for somebody who is in the logging industry. They try to pull members from many different facets of the community, but we don't have anybody really representing the forestry sector right now, or the logging sector. So if you know anybody, pass their names on to me, please. March 13th, Powell River Library trustees. It's all going along really well. I want to make a comment that the programming is doing a fantastic job. They had a pirate day with 62 in attendance, a crafter noon with 45, and then they put on a spring break comic camp with graphic novelist Sean Caramaker as guest artists. There's also a book sale happening March 25th. It was in 3 days from noon to 4, put on by the Friends of the Library, and staff and volunteers are putting together kits to be offered at the book sale for those who are living with loved ones with Alzheimer's. So I would encourage you to get down to the library and support them. Down south of town, life goes on. Lang Bay Hall is busy. Yoga, cribbage, dancing. There's always something fun happening down there. So that concludes my director's report. I'll go over here to Director Doubt first.
Okay. So last week on Friday was the regular North Island 911 board meeting. We got some information there. We looked at the service levels, and I have a graph going back to 2013 all the way to 2023 about the service levels for North Island 911 and their performance rating for call answer. And it's consistently above the 95% target line for all those years, except for some time in 2021. Which is during the heat wave and during the time when the BC ambulance service was experiencing delays in their call answering, and which reflected back to ECOM and the North Island 911 causing delays and the necessity to actually employ extra staff. But the good news about that is it's back up to well above the expectations throughout the time period currently now. We got a report from ECOM, which is the people that directly answer the 911 call before they send it to North Island 911. They give us a detailed report on their costs, talking about price increases from 1918 or 2000 from 2018 to now were insufficient to cover inflation and the volume increases that they've been having. So it required an increase of their charges to North Island 911. They're going up to $610,190 for the annual cost of Econ providing their service, which is $30,000 more than we had expected it to be. So that will be added, and we passed a motion later in the meeting to add that extra $30,000 roughly into the assessment for the 2023 fiscal year. So that's a significant change there. And we talked about the modernization of emergency communications and next generation 911, which is going to be a transition to being able to get real-time texting information. So you won't have to speak to anybody at 911 in the near future. You will be able to text. They'll be able to text back to you, and that's pretty significant in a number of issues where you might have people with a disability or where there might be background noise or indicate incidents like spousal abuse incidents where people don't want the other people in the building to know that they are calling for emergency services. They want some privacy. It also allows video sharing, so you could have real-time video if there is, for instance, a fire call. The person who's making the 911 fire call to take video of that fire going on or a car accident, so the responders that are coming would be well aware. That's all going to take place in the next by 2025. North Island 911 is aware of the UBCM's funding that they have in order to defray the cost of North Island 911, and the staff of North Island 911 are looking at how they can access that from the UBCM and make sure that the UBCM understands our particular process. Something I want to bring up at this meeting is that North Island 911 does all of the, not all, but almost all of the answering for emergency calls for our regional district. Muscogee Island is a different kettle of fish. But I want to remind staff, I guess, that they need to be cognizant of that because there are some requirements of local government authorities making approvals for next generation 911. And North Island 911 can do that for the coverage that they have, but the regional district needs to think about exactly what's going to happen for those that aren't included in the 911. So, if there's any questions about that, I'll give the answers, but things are going along. And our share of the cost for North Island 911 is about 8.25% of the entire cost. And we're going through the last year of a trial project to base the fees for North Island 911 population and assessment. So it's not simply population, it's not simply assessments, but a combination of the two to try to get a fairness between the different constituents who are all part of the same thing.
Great. Thanks very much. It's good to hear that North Island 911 is doing well, meeting their expected success rate. I can understand in, I think it's 2021, you said they didn't work quite up to snuff, but they were under a lot of pressure there. So that's understandable. I'm glad to hear about the advancements coming with next gen 911.
Yeah, just if I could just add a little bit, you know, when those things happen, it's not just the answer time that suffers, it's the people that are making the calls to be a 911 responder and to pick up the phone and be talking to somebody who has a life-threatening emergency and waiting on hold for somebody else to respond is terribly stressful. And it has an impact, not necessarily on the moment it's happening, but through a long period of time. The people that are doing that work every day.
I imagine. Thanks very much. Moving on to the screen, Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. At the beginning of March, the Coastal Invasive Species Committee met. The new executive director is busy with a number of projects. They're mostly on Vancouver Island. And the focus of that group, of that organization, is on the treatment of the most noxious invasive species. So that the goal is not to deal with, you know, kind of regular invasive species, but the real specialty are things like knotweed and giant hogweed, and things that are really difficult to deal with. Some update on Vancouver Island Regional Library, actually libraries in general. The provincial budget, which the chair just talked about regarding ICT, but the budget includes some one-time funding for public libraries, which is great news. The details of amounts and allocations to various libraries will be forthcoming soon. I believe later this week, but I don't believe that the numbers are public yet, but this will be good for VIRL and also the Powell River Regional Library. A grant is being developed by Dr. Dana Lipovsky to develop a digital archive jointly with the Leskidi Community Association Archives Committee and the Ho'ete Leskidi Archaeology Project, which Dr. Lipovsky leads. So that's through the LCA, and that's going to be looking for provincial funding and other sources of funding. So that's a very good project. And it's the reason I raise it is because it's quite possible that there will be a request for a letter of support once the application is ready. And you'll hear from me about that, or from her when it happens. Earlier this week, the Leskidi Local Trust Committee met, and one of their items related to discussions we've had is that they will write a letter to TELUS, similar to the one that we wrote to TELUS in November. So they'll add to that that voice for trying to urge TELUS to deal with ongoing service concern issues. Since we wrote that letter in November, they came over really quickly. They fixed a lot of lines, and then a number have gone backwards, and people tell me all kinds of stories they have of their woes with TELUS. So it's an ongoing issue. And finally, on March the 17th was the meeting the chair mentioned earlier between the Leskidi Local Trust Committee and the QRD, which included senior planners, the CAOs, local trustees, and chairs. We discussed a number of issues. The QRD introduced items related to reconciliation, internet, and parks and trails. The Islands Trust put forth a discussion regarding the OCP and the marine ramp. I first want to thank all staff and representatives that attended, in particular our Manager of Planning Services, Laura Rodden, for organizing the meeting. I believe it is important to maintain communications between our local governments. There are areas of overlap, and it really helps for us to keep connection with this annual meeting. One action item that arose while discussing the marine ramp was for the board and local trust committee to request staff to send a letter to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure district manager in Nanaimo to request a joint meeting with the QRD and the Islands Trust regarding the road that approaches the marine ramp. There are ongoing issues of use of the marine ramp related to service goods coming by barge on the ramp, and an action item was to try to arrange a meeting. And so to that end, I would like to put forth a notice of motion for such a letter with the motion I'll bring forward to be considered in the next committee of the whole meeting. And with that, I will end my report. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thanks very much, Director Fall. Director McCormick, you have a question?
Yeah, Director Fall, if I may. Director Fall, when you attended the Coastal Invasive Species Committee, was anything raised about a treatment for use in riparian areas? I ask because on Textile there is quite a large and invasive clump of Japanese knotweed that is infiltrating a lot of backyards, but because it's right on the seawall close to the ocean, nothing has ever been done. So is there anything coming up about that?
Well, this is one of the strengths of the Coastal ISC group, is they actually have certification, and I believe they currently have it. The outgoing executive director had certification for treatments of knotweed in riparian areas. So of course, you know, there's always a trade-off with some of these really nasty invasive species between herbicides and riparian and environmental issues. But if you leave the invasive species like knotweed, they'll just run and destroy everything anyway. So they do have, they have treated these species in riparian areas. So it's not something for the average person to do. You don't want to just go in there and throw down some herbicide, really it's about timing and getting the right amounts and so on. So I would actually, it would be really useful for you to contact Coastal ISC, because they may have ideas for projects. I'm a member, the board appoints me as a member of the committee, but our regional district doesn't actually contribute funds. Other regional districts contribute funds, and then that is in exchange for projects. So if there was, they would give advice. They'd be more than certainly willing to be giving advice on how to go forward. And if there is a need for a treatment or a desire for a treatment, they may be able to do that, but there may be a funding request, because it would cost them the money to either do it themselves or to maybe train people, if that's possible.
Great. Thanks very much.
Sorry. I see on our upcoming meetings, invasive plant technical review committee, 23rd of March, 2023. So I presume that's tomorrow. Is Director Powell going to be attending that and doing that cross collaboration? I'm just kind of curious about the technical review committee and how that overlaps with the work you're doing with the invasive species.
Well, I hadn't really, I guess that wasn't on my radar, but it might be a good idea if I was given information about it. Maybe I received it. I must have received it in my email, but I'll take a look.
I see Patrick Devereaux's on the screen, and maybe his ears are burning.
I don't know. We're doing direct reports right now. I don't know if.
Well, in relation to the.
Yeah, would be. Mr. Devereaux, do you have any comment to be made on the invasive species question, or?
Not really, Chair. Just to confirm that meeting is tomorrow, and I was prepared to answer any questions about that committee.
Okay, thanks very much. Director Paul, thanks for mentioning the public library funding. It's great to hear that we're going to have at least a one-time grant. Any money that goes to the libraries is money well spent, as far as I'm concerned. Director Lennox. Oh, we can't hear you.
You're muted. One more time. How's that?
There we go. Perfect.
Sorry about that. I was just saying that when I started my list, it seemed like it was going to be small, but then when you start realizing what's going on, it was another busy month. No particular order, the Northside Recreation Center just sent out their recent info to the community, and on a positive note, the daycare is oversubscribed and really active, and they're opening up several days during the week for the community use, and sort of encouraging increased use of the center as spring unfolds here. So that's exciting for the community. Lots more interest in the Savory OCP, fielding calls, questions. Some of them know that it's coming up, others aren't aware, but making sure that they're in the loop and ready to participate once we get underway. Spoke a couple of times with ASIC on Savory and about their new board and efforts to be involved in the OCP. Roads are a big issue on Savory, as you're well aware, and Moti has indicated that the grader will be over there in April. It's supposed to be this month, but it'll be in April, so people are looking forward to that. Field a lot of questions, emails and calls, and I just wanted to thank staff every time I reach out to them to give the details about whatever the particular question is. We really appreciate that, and there's been good information. Looking forward to AVICC and registering for a couple of their opportunities. Really good, unrelated to the QRD, but it is our area. Really good to see the herring spawning in the Salish Sea. That's good for our ecology and our the circle of life. And I just complimented the Tla'amin First Nation on them being firm that Area 15 in our area should remain closed to herring commercial fishing, which it did. So just thought you'd like to know that, and I continue to receive information from those groups and support the efforts. And then finally was able to participate in the emergency supply container workshop. I don't know if that's the actual official name of it, but it was very informative to get out to the community center and see what's in those containers and actually what is maybe lacking and could be for the future. So I just wanted to thank Jesse McDonald for
her efforts there, and a little bit of a rough start with some missing keys locked in the car, but we managed to some of our resourceful community members were able to obtain those keys. So so that was fun, and a really good participation in the community. We had a total cross section of community members, fire department, Savory Fire Department, and the way that Jesse kind of conducted that session was really cool, because it got input from those people in a meaningful way, and lots of great ideas for increased improvement to the contents of the containers, expanding that concept. Of course, Savory is on our radar for a container. Even the Hernando folks were there. We don't see a lot of people from Hernando, but the caretakers were there, and so those discussions are fruitful, and really that message about resiliency for those of us that are far removed from emergency services and in these big events. So I just wanted to give compliment to that and continue the efforts around that. Checking my notes. That's about it. Thank you.
Great. Good to hear. I agree. I participated in one of those sessions that Jesse put on Area C. I think it was back in December, and I thought it was really, really valuable, bringing together, as you mentioned, people from different aspects of the, I guess, emergency preparedness group. So it was nice to kick some ideas around. Moving on, Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. Let's see, February 22nd was our last board. So looking at my calendar, on the 24th, I met with Reno from Ministry of Transportation to talk about Springbrook Road. And he's going to be taking a look into some of the suggestions and getting back to me. On the 28th of February, I attended the Regional Connectivity Knowledge Network meeting, which is held virtually, and that's been organized by the UBCM, talking about internet access in some of the more remote regions. There's a little bit of overlap with what's going on here, but a lot of it is focused on up north and some of the really remote communities where they're trying to get internet access and they're 50 miles from the nearest signal. And then let's see, the beginning of the month was marked by that nasty flu that was going around that spread through the whole family like wildfire. And on the 20th, I was scheduled to attend the Liquid Waste Management Committee. However, I was trying to attend on my phone and was trying to get off a ferry off of Langdale and pulling over and then trying to get the connection. It just wasn't working. So I'm going to be reaching out to Chair Palm over the next couple of days and getting an update on all the things that were discussed there. And other than that, it is now spring. The agricultural community is working very hard. And after this meeting's done, I got to get back to work on the farm. So that ends my report. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. It's the technology we deal with today is fantastic, except when it doesn't work how we want it to. Director McCormick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On the 9th of March, I attended the Textile Island Recreation Commission meeting, and Mr. Devereaux, Patrick Devereaux, was there, and he outlined a number of the upcoming work projects for 2023, including the resurfacing of Emily Lake Trail and also our tennis courts. We also had a delegation at Rec Commission from the disc golf players who brought the issue to the commission some time ago. And they had asked staff if the final tweaks of the course could be done after playing it for a year before the final things are put into place. And I'd really like to offer a commendation and praise and thank you to staff, because this has been a model cooperative process where the local community has worked with staff. They've come up with a few little changes, move this 4 feet over or whatever. And so now that is being implemented. And so I just want to really thank staff for the cooperation with the community in working on that issue. On the 10th of March was a very happy day for a number of people on Texada, because it was the start, after nearly 3 years, of the Friday lunches put on by the Texada Seniors Council in the Senior Center. And it was great to have those back again. A lot of people used that as a social outing, and it was wonderful to see that resume. On the 15th, I attended the Texada Garden Club, and there were a number of concerns about pest management. certain pests go in cycles, and this is the 7th year of a 7-year cycle. So they're anticipating an issue with caterpillars this year. So, things are, coming into play to deal with that. On the 18th of March was an organizing meeting under the Textile Arts, Culture, and Tourism umbrella of the Artist Studio Tour. The last Artist Studio Tour took place in 2018. So this has been 5 years now. And it's been a long go for the local arts community because people have suffered economically and financially during the whole COVID thing. But it looks like we will have an artist studio tour this year, August 12th and 13th. Please mark your calendars. So that will be something to look forward to. It involves a lot of volunteers as well. So it's a real coming together of the community. And I guess finally, on the 19th of March, I attended the annual general meeting of the Textile Island Health Services Society. And they're the group that supports the operation of our clinic, which is an RD facility. The big issue for Textile is the retirement of our longstanding resident family doctor, Kevin Black, who will be leaving at the end of August. So far, no replacement has been identified in spite of a campaign to recruit a new doctor. And the issue really is housing. That's one of the key issues because there is no housing for this doctor to move into when they come to the island. So that is continuing to be worked on, and hopefully a resolution will come into play. But it is a great concern for a lot of the people on the island. So, thank you.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that right now there's no replacement for Dr. Black. I understand that can be a real hassle. And of course, the caterpillars are no good, but then you also have a lot of good things happening with the trail and the tennis court and the disc golf. It's always fun to hear about positive steps being taken on Textile. Rebellion. You have a question for?
I do.
Okay, and then you can, right after that, just go ahead with your report.
Thank you, Chair. So the Artist Studio Tour, is that joining the rest of the cadets Artist Studio Tour or a separate one?
It's a separate one, and it takes place on the island. So it is completely separate.
Okay. Okay. So it's not at the same time or anything like that?
Hopefully not. It was great effort to try to not conflict with any of those other events that are going on, because that divides the arts community. So yeah, hopefully not.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Go ahead with your report.
Thank you so much, Chair. So I'm gonna start with saying I also went to the Western Forest Community Advisory Group meeting. I represent the city there, but I had learned some things there that I thought people in the region might be interested in, so I thought I'd report out on them. Western Forest Products also does a firewood permits, so people who want to get firewood for their home, they can go to the Western Forest Products office and they'll give you a permit and tell you where you can do it. And they have a season that's from about October to March, so kind of wrapping up quite soon, probably maybe ending depending on weather and how they're doing that. But they estimate they've permitted 3,154 cubic meters of firewood in this 2022. They don't charge for their firewood permits, so those are all in-kind donations for people who want to gather that. They've also donated $5,000 to our local food bank, and they estimate that their value of all of their in-kind and money donations into the community was about $75,820 in 2022. So I found those to be really good things to know, and I thought I'd share those with the community in addition to what Chair Brandner had to say. I also attended the opening of the International Film Festival that we had here in Powell River. So Cadet Film Society did an international film festival. They opened it with a screening of the movie filmed here in that region in Powell River, and I got to see that, and that was super exciting. I really liked the movie because it was a good movie.
What's it called?
Exile.
Exile. So it should be coming out for real somewhere, but right now it was just a screening, so they don't have a showing. Anyway, you can see, you recognize all of the scenery. Almost all of it's within our region. Very little of it's filmed outside of our region. So it's so neat to see how our region can be used as a movie filming place and see it in the movies. It was pretty special. I also was offered the opportunity to speak at the International Film Festival on Women's Day when we opened up the Women's Day showing. There was, let me get this right. Sorry, I gotta find the right note. There was a 23-minute show that was filmed locally by textile artist, well, no, her daughter, Claire Sanford, but about textile artist Deborah Dunca from Texada Island. And it was called Violet Gave Willingly. So that was a very local film made on Texada by Texada people about our local people. And it was, I thought it was quite interesting being our, you know, it was about women processing some things that had happened to them. So it wasn't really a happy film, but it was, you know, really relevant to Women's Day, I thought. So I got to do that, and they let me speak, and people listened and was happy I was there. So I thought that was pretty cool. The main movie was called Rosie, and it was set in Montreal, also a Canadian film. And it was about a young Indigenous girl whose mother was part of the 60s scoop and had grown up in foster care, and she passed away, and she'd indicated that her daughter should go to her foster sister, who wasn't a biological. Anyway, it was a really great movie about how the multi-generational impacts for 60s scoop children were still impacting people today. And I got to watch that as well. Back to my other notes. We at the City of Powell River will be continuing with our strategic planning. It's not on the website yet, but I expect it to be published sometime before the end of this week. Because the meetings I think are happening next week, if they can confirm the dates. So people who are interested in that should keep their eye on the website, and when the meetings are published, they'll know when that's happening. Out in Lund on the weekend, I met with an Andrew and Sue Clark, who are water specialists and environmentalists that have just arrived and immigrated to our region recently, and it's significant because we talked a little about how they arrived at the decision to come to Cathat and from where they were at. They're environmentalists, and they did an assessment of the whole planet as to where they wanted to go in regards to natural resiliency. And they had a few choices, and they landed on coming here to Cathat. So I wanted people to understand that our natural assets within our region are an economic draw all by themselves, and we need to prioritize that, protect it, and maintain it, because it's so important, not just to us, but to everybody. And there are people coming here because it's such an amazing area. And so as long as people keep that in mind as we move forward with how we vote and decide what we want our region to look like, I think we're going to do great. They're also specialists. They're also studying the ground, and they think there's some options in Lund for water that are groundwater that are different than what we've been studying so far. So that's just an interesting point for folks out in Lund who are worried about water. So I know that they said they'd met with Jason as well, but I thought I'd put it on my report since he hadn't put it on his. I was contacted by some folks from Cathat Old Growth who are interested in getting support from both the city and the regional district for a resolution to UBCM regarding legislation to make forestry companies more responsive or responsible for downstream impacts to community watersheds. And so we're just talking about that, and I'm hoping to help them formulate a resolution that they can come to the various organizations and be a delegation to seek support for that concept. I'm gonna leave my report there. Thanks.
Great, thanks very much. It's always nice to hear about, you know, those kind of positive reasons why people move to the community. We've got a real gem here and we have to make sure we maintain it. And it's neat to see or to hear about the cathode being used in exile, and hopefully our support of the Vancouver Island North Film Commission will lead to more of those opportunities.
Well, I'd be super supportive of us making future plans to invest more money in retaining what we have as far as park acquisition and that sort of thing.
Great, thanks very much. Okay, director's reports are wrapped up and we're moving on to the consent agenda. So now is the opportunity for anybody to pull an item from the consent agenda if they see fit. Seeing no hands. So if somebody would like to move the consent agenda, I'd be appreciated. Director McCormick, seconded by Director Elliott. Thanks very much. Any discussion, I guess? All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. We are down to item 12.1, application for subdivision in the agricultural land reserve, district lot 5253, 10084 Nassichuk Road, electoral area B. A recommendation. Director McCormick is moving the recommendation, seconded by Director Lennox. Thanks very much. Any discussion? And no, mover hasn't had a hand up, so we'll move on to Director Gisborne.
Okay. I'm not going to go over the same points I brought forward to the planning committee as to why the ALC will most likely turn this application down. Instead, I'm going to discuss 2 points that I believe are more important when it comes to good governance in our decision making. Respect and reputation. At the committee meeting for the Agricultural Advisory Committee on February the 6th, they passed a motion that the committee recommend to the board the Cathett Regional District deny the application. One of our committees passed a resolution to recommend to the board. Our standard practice is to have such resolutions brought to the board and to be placed on the agenda. And yet such a motion has not been placed on the agenda. The staff recommendation put before the planning committee was to approve the application, and the majority of the directors at the planning committee supported the staff recommendation. So one committee of our appointed community experts have looked at the application and unanimously recommended to the board to reject the application. Then a month later in March, the planning committee meets and recommends to the board the opposite. I find this to be disrespectful of our Agricultural Advisory Committee. My second point is reputation. The Agricultural Land Commission has urged local governments not to avoid making decisions and to not forward applications they would not endorse. I believe the regional district is risking its credibility in forwarding this application to the Agricultural Land Commission. If we establish a reputation that we're going to support subdivision of the ALR, then I believe this could result in a deluge of applications. This would put more unnecessary work on our Agricultural Advisory Committee and our staff. So I would strongly encourage members of the Planning Committee to vote down this motion. We should not be sending this application to the Agricultural Land Commission. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Do I have any other? McCormick.
Yeah, thank you. I supported this recommendation at committee, and I continue to support it because it's not one of those easy to fit in, slotted in a certain category kind of projects. Although, yes, it is a subdivision in the ALR, It is not a typical subdivision. There would be no loss of agricultural land as a result of this. In fact, as the proponent pointed out at planning committee, it will actually make agriculture more viable on their property. And so because of that, I do support the recommendation. I also want to say that I do recommend, or I do respect all of our advisory committees, whether it's the Textile Recreation Commission, the Agricultural Advisory Committee, or the Airport Advisory Committee, you know, but they are advisory committees and they're providing their best advice. It is still up to the board to make its final decision. And because I respect that they voted to deny the application on the principle of no subdivisions on ALR land. In this case, I believe that the subdivision is worthy because it results in no loss, and in fact, more opportunity for agriculture as a result. So I do support it in spite of their best advice. And it is no disrespect to them that I continue to support what the proponent would like to do. So I think it's best for us to pass the recommendation to them. They will make the final decision. But yeah, I do think it's worthy of support.
Okay, thanks very much. I concur with a lot of what you say, essentially all of what you say. I also, I mean, no disrespect to our committees, but the QRD has to look at the information in front of us with using a different lens. We have different priorities. We have to see how it fits within the OCP. And in this particular case, as you mentioned, it actually is being used for agricultural purposes. It actually was one of the few properties in the ALR in that area that is being used in such a way, and we'd like to continue to see it being used for farming, for agricultural purposes. Dr. Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I've given this some thought, and as per the point around the committee recommendations, each board is not to be fettered by recommendations from another group, but rather to fully consider everything that is put before them, including recommendations. I thought that the proponents made a really good case for why agriculture was going to be enhanced, and that was their intention. I think agriculture is super important, and I don't want to be sitting here voting against a good business case for enhancing agriculture in our region. And they've made it very clear that that's their intention. I don't understand the full reasons behind the recommendation of the Agricultural Advisory Committee. I do see what their recommendation is based on more of a policy statement than the individual aspects of this particular application, or if it is based on the individual aspects, I didn't care to comment on that in their recommendation. I believe it's up to the agricultural board to decide whether it's to be subdivided or not. I would like to support the proponents within our region who want to do good agricultural stuff and have asked us to support them. So I will be voting in favor.
Well, I hate to say, but you won't be voting at all.
Oh.
It's for areas A, B, C, and D.
Okay, those are my comments. I'm sorry, I missed that part.
That's all right. I should have mentioned it ahead of time. Any other comments?
But thank you, Chair.
You're welcome.
I would vote if I could in favor.
No one who has, so Director Gisborne.
Yeah. The reason for some of my comments are actually quite similar to a news article from 2019 in Abbotsford about allowing more than 2 vehicles to be parked on ALR. And that's just 2 vehicles. And the council of the day was looking at what would the ALC even be willing to accept. Our Agricultural Advisory Committee have very excellent, like they're well educated. Some of them are very tuned in to what the Agricultural Land Commission will and will not accept. And I believe that's one of the reasons why they unanimously put forward the recommendation to reject. I would be extremely surprised if the Agricultural Land Commission, approves this application at all. They have made it very clear that they are very opposed to the subdivision of ALR, and they feel that the more parcels you have of ALR means that you get more homes on it, you get more development on it, and you actually lose land from the ALR that is then moving into residential development. It is one of the main reasons why the ALR was created in the first place, to stop local governments from subdividing the ALR for the purposes of accessing money from the bank and from building housing on it. So I don't really see how this application will be accepted by the ALC. And that's the other reason why I think that putting this application to the ALC could actually harm our reputation, because I want them to take the things that we send to them seriously. So that's why I'm in opposition.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Like I mentioned, we have to look at it based on our priorities and our lens, and if it fits within our parameters. And the ALC obviously has the freedom to accept it or deny it based on theirs. So, but it's not our job to do their job for them. So I would be in favor of this. I see Ms. Rodden has her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to emphasize the rationale for staff's recommendation on this application. It's based on the fact that the Electoral Area C OCP bylaw supports subdivision of agricultural land to a minimum parcel size of 2 hectares. This is clearly stated in the OCP, and it is stated in every one of the regional district's official community plans in all electoral areas. And so staff have recommended support because the proposed lot sizes meet the 2 hectare minimum. The existing and proposed use is agricultural, and the proposal is to retain, protect, and enhance the existing farm operations. I realize that the advisory committee recommendation was to deny the application. I was at the meeting. I provide technical support to that advisory committee, but it's important that the board, remember that in each of our official community plan processes, there has always been a contradiction around whether to support subdivision in the ALR or not. And in the past, the board's received many delegations from people wanting to see smaller parcel sizes and young people wanting to get into farming. And it's the affordability of the land, and the minimum parcel size would allow for those smaller parcels. So that's the background to staff's recommendation and our rationale.
Thanks very much. We've had twice, but go ahead one more time. Sure.
The Agricultural Advisory Committee put forward a recommendation that they deny the application based on the OCP policy 2.3.12.7, which states the regional district supports the retention, protection, and enhancement of all land within the agricultural capability, encourages the consolidation of smaller parcels of agricultural land into larger, more viable agricultural units, and encourages the retention of the land based with existing farm operations. That was the recommendation from the Agricultural Advisory Committee based on the policy of the OCP. And this application takes a large chunk of land and splits it into smaller parcels. Our OCP policy, once again, 2.3.12.7, encourages the consolidation of smaller parcels into larger parcels. This application is going the opposite direction. That is the basis for one of the main reasons for the Agricultural Advisory Committee's recommendation. That's what our OCP says. I stand behind that policy, and I stand with the Agricultural Advisory Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, you're welcome. Seeing no other hands up, I'm gonna call the vote at this time. All in favor of the recommendation? 3 in favor of, and any opposed? Director Gisborne opposed. Motion carries. Thanks very much. Moving on to, there are no bylaws, so moving on to reports, the results of the alternate approval process for Lund Community Center loan authorization and consideration of assent vote. And there are no ands, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 motions, it looks like here. Do I have a mover for the first recommendation? Director Lennox, thank you very much. Seconded by Director Gisborne. Any discussion? None there, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, before we get on to the other motions, which kind of take us down the road. One of the questions I have is, because I saw that there's a time limit that we can have a referendum if we want to go that route. If we don't go that route, that 80 days, what other options do we have? Is it kind of like, is it dead if we decide to have a referendum next year? Are we not allowed to do that? So that's kind of more of a question to our staff and corporate officer. Like, is it either 80 days referendum or nothing at all? So
there's 2 questions there that need to be addressed. So this bylaw has gone to AAP, so there is an 80-day requirement to bring it to referendum, or you need to wait 6 months before you can introduce a same question. This project is being brought forward because the grant was received for 4.2 million, give or take. And we are on a time limit with them to begin the project. So no, we could not still retain those funds and come back to it at a later date. The deadline for conducting this AAP would be at the end of May. It's in the report. So we're aiming for the beginning of, or the referendum. If the board wants to go that way, we would be aiming for the beginning of May. Have the vote.
Point of order, Chair. This recommendation is about to accept the results. It's not about anything else at this point.
That's true. We are getting ahead of ourselves. So work it out.
Yeah, I've got different questions. So it was rejected basically by, I think, 3 votes. If my math is correct there, and there are 6 votes that weren't counted, 6 spoiled ballots. And do you have any insight about the reasons why the ballots were spoiled? Were they filled out incorrectly? Or?
Thank you through the chair. So there is a variety of different reasons why. Potentially one of the ballots wasn't within the service area. And yes, some weren't filled out correctly. Communication was made with the people who made errors, but there just wasn't enough time to facilitate them getting a new form into the organization before the deadline.
Okay, thanks. So very, very close.
Very close.
A matter of 3 individuals deciding to vote or not vote on a particular day. So thanks for that.
Director Gisborne?
I'd just like to thank our corporate officer. My question about the the next steps based on the report really helped me understand, the 6 months deadline and how, to move forward with the next steps. So thank you very much for answering that question.
If no other questions, we'll vote on the first motion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. So item number 2, if the board have the Catholic Regional District go to the public within 80 days of March 6th, 2023 to ask the eligible electors of the Northside Recreation Service Area, and then you have the question that will be posed to them in the referendum. Do I have a mover? Director Dowd. Thank you very much. And seconded by Director McCormick. Any discussion? Director Dowd.
Yeah, I have a question about the amount in there. The amount in the motion is basically we're going to ask people if they're in favor of the Cassette Regional District adopting the loan authorization bylaw to borrow up to $1.1 million plus interest. I've got a couple of questions about that. I think we passed a bylaw to authorize the loan in anticipation of approval. I think that bylaw has already been passed. First part of my question is, if we were going to change that number, would we have to go back and change that bylaw? And the other question is, if you look at the 1.1 million plus the grant amount, how much contingency is there for overruns in costs? Because it was some time since we had the estimation for the cost to build the project and apply for the grant. Time has gone by, and I'm concerned about getting into a situation where we get an approval of borrowing 1.1 million and having a grant of 4.2, I think, million, and then getting bids for the project and having it come in at 7.8 million with no contingency and no place to get the money from. So 2 questions. One is, if we're going to change the number, do we have to change the bylaw? We have to go through the process to have a different bylaw. And how much contingency is there in the numbers that are before us right now?
I think I'm going to imagine to turn this over to Corporate Officer really quickly, but if I would be inclined to keep the numbers as is, because it says borrow up to 1.1 million. And
I just got a question of staff about what the answer was to those questions. I wasn't debating it yet.
No, I wasn't debating you either. I was just saying, until the money is in the bank, it's wouldn't count on it completely, but
so a loan authorization does have to receive the Inspector of Municipalities approval. So any change to that would require approval as well, and it would change the deadline or the timeline and the question that was already asked. So it would change this process. It's not that we couldn't go forward with a different bylaw, but we would require, I'm not entirely sure if we would be able to amend this bylaw with a new bylaw, or if we require a whole new bylaw to go forward with a different number.
And the other question?
I'm going to turn that over to Linda.
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, I just wanted to let you know that we did have, when we looked at these values in 2022, that included a 20% contingency based on our 2022 estimates. So that's the contingency that is in there right now. And I also want to mention that, yes, the borrowing is up to 1.1 million. So we also have commitments of donations. And so it's expected that we wouldn't borrow all of the funds up to the 1.1 million. We would reduce it by the value of the donations.
If I can just respond now that I've got the answers to my question, is I'd like to contribute that I think we should leave the amount the same as it is, because it would take time and it would probably cause delays to go back and reconsider the bylaw, to change the bylaw, to have a different amount. And the current amount that's in there is borrowing up to, and we should be clear when we're talking about any referendum that comes out or approval process that that's exactly what it is. We could borrow less. If we're lucky enough to get $1 million worth of donations, could end up borrowing $100,000. But if we're not lucky, you have to have that safety valve to make sure that there's enough money to complete the program.
Okay, thank you. Director Lennox, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Maybe this is a question for Mr. Devereaux. At the public engagement recently, this concept of cost overruns, and that was discussed at length, and you made a good explanation of the as-build process. Maybe you could elaborate on that so people know how we can avoid those kind of overruns and that concept.
Mr. Devereaux?
Yes, Chair, if I may. The idea of those contracts is that the financial responsibility lies in the bidder and designer. So the contract goes out as a design build. It comes back with a price, so we know what it is up front before we strike any any sod is turned. So if it doesn't meet our budget, then we don't have to do it.
Okay. Thanks very much. And yeah, Mr. Director Lennox, you got a follow-up?
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up in support of this. You know, when I've been discussing the AAP process in the community, and again, some of the confusion, but also the that if it did fail, it would move to referendum. That is sort of a general concept that people in my area, whether they're pro or con, are anticipating. So I'm in favor of the process to go to the public. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. McCormick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Since we know they've already got more than $100,000 that they have fundraised for and achieved, and hopefully that number will grow. I'm just wondering, because 1.1 million could be quite scary to a lot of people and generate a more negative response than if the number was actually more realistic. I'm just wondering if there's any advantage to try to bring the 1.1 down to whatever is remaining in the needed funds, you know, when it goes to referendum. So my question is there an advantage to bringing the number down to generate a higher support rate?
I would be inclined to say we leave it as is, because I don't think it would be fair for us to appear to be falling on one side or the other of the referendum, and just state the facts and not try to strengthen the side of either group. Yes.
We know now that 1.1 wouldn't be needed because they've already generated over 100,000. So I'm thinking that based on the knowledge that we have, that this money has been you know, pledged to support the project. If it just plain doesn't make sense to put forward a realistic number rather than the number that we pulled at the very beginning.
Okay. Corporate officer.
If I may, just this number is the number that's in the bylaw. And so we need this question to reflect the bylaw, because we need approval of the electors to go ahead with the bylaw. So if we wanted to change the number in the question, we would have to go through a new bylaw process. And that process could take significant amount of time, because it has to go through a certain number of meetings and then back to the province for approval, and then back for direction.
Okay. All right, Director Gisborne.
Yeah. Thanks to the corporate officer for making that clear. So my understanding is we have the bylaw, we did the alternate approval process, and the alternate approval process didn't pass. That alternate approval process had the number 1.1 million. The bylaw has 1.1 million. While we have had significant contributions from members of the public, if we are to change that to 900,000, whatever it is, that means we got to change the bylaw. We got to, and that doesn't then reflect the alternate approval process. And that can, you know, we got an 80-day deadline here. If we are going to go to referendum, one of the things I would really like to bring to the attention of the board and everyone is, I remember in the past there was a referendum, not regional district, but it came across to the public that I think it was the municipality of the area was advocating for one side of the referendum, saying, you guys should vote yes for this. And the people that were in opposition, that got their defenses up, that got them really going like, oh, the local government is pushing for one side of this argument. And that's something I think that we as an organization should do our best to avoid as elected officials, as a board, from saying like, no, you guys should go out and vote yes. I think that the community groups up in Lund, I think that's something that they can really advocate for, either the yes or the no. I'm not going to say one or the other. And I think that the regional district, the directors, and all our staff, the best thing that we can do for the referendum process is to make sure that the information is as clear as possible, that the public are getting clear and accurate information, and that we're not, you know, appearing as one side or the other when it comes to a referendum question, because that can really make challenging situations more challenging in a community when it comes across as though the regional district might be pushing one side of this envelope. So I'm absolutely in favor of going to referendum, but I just want to make sure that the regional district kind of stays neutral in this process because it is it's an election process. Is that correct? So we shouldn't be advertising one way or the other, if that makes sense. So that's the concern I have. But other than that, I love referendums. So
Thank you, Chair. So when we have a referendum that is outside a regular election or general election, what do we do to make sure people have the information they need? So it's expensive to have a referendum. I'd like to avoid the people who are voting being confused about what they're voting about, such as just happened, or at least that's what's being reported. What is it the regional district does do to get the information out there? Do we make flyers? Do we do, what do we do?
Thank you. So there has been significant information shared with the community already on this. Of course, we have to take a really careful role between information sharing and stay on that side. So we do everything we can to share the information with the community based on a communication plan. So in this case, there's requirement for 2 separate kinds of notices in the paper. Already there was with regards to the AAP, a lot of information that went out in a neighborhood mail out, public information session. So our goal is to share information with the people who are going to cast a yes or no vote.
So we do a mail out?
So I'm not entirely sure if we would conduct a mail out for this one. Okay. But we did for the AAP. We sent out information on that. So we would, for this one, it's required to do, there will be 4 advertisements in the paper.
Okay. And as part of the information, do we talk about the project overall as far as there's a grant? The grant doesn't work unless we have a loan to cover our portion. And this question is whether you're in favor of having a loan to cover our portion or not. So the questions are always about where we highlight the wording is to, are we in favor of the bylaw? It's confusing to people.
Through the chair. It is very important to share the total cost, including any donations received, grants that were going to come with the public. So we always update our webpage. That's where we have all of the information, anything new, any news release, any staff report goes into there. We follow our engagement framework when.
We also go on Facebook.
Yeah.
Page as well. Just another way to reach the public. Next on the speakers list is Director Doug.
Yeah, I'll try to
He's good.
stop this noise for Matt.
Theme song going.
He does, yes.
Is it me or is it hot and stuff?
It's extremely hot and stuff here.
You can always tell when I'm getting a phone call anyway. Is it my turn?
It is your turn.
Sorry about that. I have to turn it off before I come to these meetings. I understand that there are legislated requirements for the information that we have to provide. If the regional district is going to take a referendum, we have to tell people the amount that's being borrowed, what it's being borrowed for, and how and when to vote. I think those are probably the legislative requirements. And the smart thing to do for the regional district is to stick with those and making sure that those get published and everybody can understand what they are if they read them. I'm in favor of a mail out to make sure everybody is aware of what's going on so that they get a chance to come and vote. I don't know if it's ever possible to avoid confusion. Be part of the natural state of human beings. You get confused about what you're doing. I understand what the delegations were saying is people have a tendency to look at a wider group of issues that are coming up, you know, but we can't guess what's going to happen with the cost of the Lund water system or the Pine Tree irrigation district. We can't guess all those things. I think the best we can do is provide clear information about what is being asked. People are being asked if they want to borrow $1.1 million to complete a recreation center for the Northside Recreation Service. And if they want to do that, they can come and vote yes on the right days at right times and whatever alternative processes there are, and just make sure we communicate that as much as we can. And I'm sure there are many enthusiastic people who are on one side or the other in the decision-making process, and you know, they'll do what they do in election periods and get out there and campaign for their sides. You know, I'm in favor of this resolution. I think we should go ahead and do it. We've got a bunch more pieces that go to it, and I'll talk about those when we get to them, but I'm in favor of going ahead with this.
Okay, seeing no other hands, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Moving on to item 3. The board approved the synopsis of Lund Community Center loan authorization bylaw number 564. The notices associated with this said vote as follows. And you've got the paragraph in front of you.
So moved.
Thank you, Deputy Gisborne, seconded by Director McCormick. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Going down to recommendation number 4, that the board appoint Michelle Jones as Chief Election Officer and Esme Sturton as Deputy Chief Election Officer in relation to the assent voting question put to the electorate for Lund Community Center loan authorization bylaw number 564/2020.
So moved.
Deputy Gisborne, Director McCormick, any discussion? None, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. And moving on to item number 5, which is actually a weighted vote. All the other ones were unweighted. That the board approve a budget amendment to reduce the planned 2023 contribution to reserve by $17,000 to cover the estimated cost of the assent vote and the 2022 operating deficit.
So moved.
Director Gisborne, Director Doubt, any discussion? Okay, Director Doubt.
I just have a question, and because of the wording, the motion is that the board approves the budget amendment to reduce the planned 2023 contribution to reserve by $17,000 to cover the estimated cost. And I think that means the contribution to the Northside Recreation Reserve from the Northside Recreation Service. Am I right about that?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, yes, that is referring to the Northside Recreation Non-Statutory Reserve.
Okay, I've asked that kind of question before. You can assume that from these motions, but I really like to see it written down because the board has many reserves and many different budgets. So for me, I like to be crystal clear on where the money's coming from and going to.
Yeah, thank you. Any other discussion points, Director Gisborne?
Yes. The first one is, because this is a financial decision affecting only the North Side recreation service, then I really think it should actually be an unweighted vote amongst the whole board, because it's only one electoral area that's a participant in the service, which is Area A, and typically, you know, only the service participants vote, but because there's only one person that votes, I think this should be an unweighted vote. However, based on the discussion that we've already had, I don't think that'll really matter because I think this is going to pass. The question, though, that I have is, you know, Director Doubt brought out a really good point about making sure there's clear information going out, and whether a mail out happens or not is kind of still up in the air. And I'm wondering if the staff do choose to do a mail out to help, you know, inform the community, will $17,000 be enough, or would the staff need a bit more, you know, money in the pot? in order to do a mail out? Would we be able to afford a mail out with 17,000, or we could? I'm thinking not.
Thank you through the chair. The majority of costs is associated with staffing and public notices. Distribution through the neighborhood ad mail system is not a huge cost. We wouldn't do individual like envelopes. We typically do through neighborhood ad mail because it gets to, we're allowed to select all protocols and get it to every address.
Okay, well, good. Then that relieves any concern I have, and I see Director Lennox, so I'm going to.
Director Lennox, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Chair. I'm just reading the report here, and I just want to be clear that the resolution is for 17,000, but in actual fact, you're predicting that the cost of the referendum is 10,000, and the 7 is to actually get back to kind of break even in the reserve. Is that, am I got that right?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, 10,000 is going to be allocated towards the cost of the approval process, and 7,000 is to cover the 2022 deficit.
Thank you. So it's kind of a double objective there, and you know, I understand it's hard when we have no funds to accomplish these things, but I appreciate that this is an important effort. Thank you.
And Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to add my voice to support the idea of mailouts. Because people are not expecting a general election or not showing up at the polls, it would be really good if each and every one of them received a thing in the mail saying, this is the day that you should go do this. I think that some people don't read the newspaper or are not online and not necessarily paying attention to the avenues of media that we use. I know that in London there'll be a really robust conversation and they'll probably hear it word of mouth anyway, but just in case there's some folks hanging out at home that aren't listening, a mail out would be appreciated. So that's just my comment, and I really appreciated the questions around the budget to cover that cost and that it's not a barrier to that. So thank you.
Before I go on to Director Lennox, in the case of doing a mail out, would you require a board vote on this, or just
that's operations? That's how we work on that through we used all the tools.
Okay,
yeah, input.
That's what I figured. I just want to make sure. Director Lennox.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add that, you know, thinking about communications and the feedback I received, there are a fair number of my residents who don't have good connectivity. They don't have cell phones. They really, you know, they choose a lifestyle, but they want to be engaged, and, you know, they need, to the points that have been raised, they need just the accurate information, unbiased, and then they can make an informed decision. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands, vote on the recommendation. All in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Moving on to 14.2, housekeeping on the Resource Recovery Center Purchasing Authority. You have the recommendation in front of you. I'm sure you've all read it. Would anybody like to move the recommendation?
Moved.
Sir, Director Powell, seconded by Director Lennox. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. On to no new business, but we have question period. Mr. Glinsky, are you online?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I am online, and I have a couple of questions. With regard to item number 4, which was the delegations, I'm not sure which community organization was represented with that presentation.
I was just going to say, if you did.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
It's just Lund Community Society.
Lund Community Society, thank you. And do you know who the delegates were? I didn't know those individuals. Through the chair.
We have,
go ahead. Thank you, through the chair, Ronnie Allman, Ed Levy, and Christine McRae.
I thank the corporate officer for that. For item 7.2, which was with regard to the Pine Tree District, I think I heard that one individual was opposed, Chair, to the vote. Who was that? I didn't catch that.
Director Elliott.
I thank you for that, Chair. And the final question is with regard to item 14.1. I assume that no date for the assent vote has been set yet. Am I correct in that?
Corporate Officer, that is correct. We have not set a vote yet.
Perhaps through the chair, the corporate officer could describe briefly for me the voting mechanism. I'm wondering if there'll be polls or whether it'll be mail-in or how it will all come about.
Go ahead, Corporate Officer.
Thank you, through the chair. Our election procedure bylaw allows for mail out. So there will be advanced voting 10 days prior to the general voting day, which must occur on a Saturday. We're aiming for the beginning of May, but we still have to make sure that we can meet all of our legislative advertisement requirements before setting the date. If it is okay, I could touch base with you and let you know what we're planning, likely by the end of the week.
Through the chair, that would be most appropriate and appreciated. Thank you very much. Those are my questions, Chair. Thanks for the opportunity.
No, you're very welcome, Mr. Galinsky. So that has brought us to the in-camera session. Would somebody like to read the motion underneath there?
Sure. I move that the board move in camera, the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91C, labor relations or other employee relations, D, the security of the property of the regional district, K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a regional district service that are at the preliminary stages and that, in the view of the board, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the regional district if they were held in public. L, discussions with regional district officers and employees respecting regional district objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purposes of preparing an annual report under section 98, annual regional district report, and the consideration of whether a board meeting should be closed under provision of this subsection or subsection 2. And 2A, part of a board meeting must be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to one or more of the following. B, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the regional district and a provincial government or the federal government or both, or between a provincial government or the federal government or both and a third party.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Director Doubt. Any discussion? In favor? Any opposed? None opposed. We are going, and motion carries. We're going in camera.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Can you phone me? Okay, thank you. Okay, bye.
Okay, are we back in with Roger?
Didn't think the chair would back in the question.
Okay, we are back in open session. Chrissy can say it's right out here, right? So we have a rise report on the following items. The board received the Workstation BC Employer Report for 2022. The Catholic Regional District approves the contract for Shelter Point Park Campground caretakers Tyler Danzig and Sophia Khan. The board has approved a direct award contract renewal with Michael Wall for project management services related to the Resource Recovery Center. The board approved a non-obligated collective agreement wage increase for QP 798 workers with the regional district, which brings the total wage increase for QP 798 workers to 6.9% for 2023. This increase matches the BC Consumer Price Index at December 31st. This increase will be backdated to January 1st, 2023. The collective agreement between the Catholic Regional District and QP Local 798 expires on December 31st, 2023. And we have the board received notification that our grant applications to the Strategic Priorities Fund for the Waste Transfer Station, Van Anda Improvement District Water Distribution System, and to upgrade Gillies Bay Improvement District Water Treatment and Expansion were not approved for funding. So we've reached the end of our agenda. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.